Somewhere in the dark of a limestone gorge in southern France, on a wall daylight has never reached, there is the head of a horse. It is drawn in charcoal, in 3 or 4 unhesitating strokes. The artist went back over the cheek and blended the black with a fingertip so the jaw turns away from you into shadow. The animal has volume, it has weight. The person who made it died before the last ice age ended, and we have spent 30 years arguing not about who they were, but about what that horse's head is allowed to mean. Chauvet Cave runs about 400 meters into the limestone above the Ardèche River, and its walls carry more than 1,000 catalogued images, over 400 animals, at least 13 species, drawn in charcoal and red ochre and cut into the rock. What is strange is not the number, it is the casting. Later cave art is largely a menu: horses, bison, deer, the animals people ate. Chauvet is full of the animals that ate people: lions, woolly rhinoceroses, cave bears, hyenas, a panther. The people who chose these subjects were not drawing dinner. The panel that everyone photographs holds about 20 animals across 7 meters of wall. 4 horse heads sit at its center, one behind another. Below them 2 woolly rhinoceroses meet head-on with their horns crossed. The important thing is not the crowd, it is the order. Specialists who have mapped the panel stroke by stroke can put its stages in sequence. Engravings first, high up, then the central area scraped clean, then the rhinoceroses, then the aurochs, then the horses. Species by species, working round the wall. That is not doodling, that is a plan. Shading is the detail that changed the argument, because before this cave was opened, nobody had identified it in Paleolithic art at all. Lay charcoal on the rock, then drag the black outward with a fingertip, so the tone fades instead of stopping. Under the microscope, at 12 times magnification, you can see the charcoal worked into the wall's own clay to make grays, exactly the way a painter mixes on a palette. On the red animals, the blending concentrates on the heads and forelegs, where a modern illustrator would also put it. One person having a good day does not leave that pattern across a whole cave. A taught technique does. Depth is harder to prove than shading, so it matters which example carries it. The panel of the rhinos is the strong one. 17 rhinoceroses arranged so the horns get smaller toward the back of the group, with gaps deliberately left between the animals, so the herd reads as receding rather than as a pile. The famous 4 horse heads are the weak one, and popular accounts lean on them anyway. Their overlap does suggest an interest in space, but the horse nearest the viewer is the smallest of the 4, which is the wrong way round. Take the horses as an interest in depth, take the rhinos as evidence of a method. Charcoal will not take on a wall that carries a film of damp clay. It smears into the surface and comes out faint and grey, and no amount of pressing helps. So in the clay-covered chambers, the artists scraped the wall first, taking the brown skin off by hand to expose the white limestone beneath. That solves the materials problem and hands them a bright ground free, so the black bites and the drawing carries in a moving flame. In one chamber the same gesture becomes the artwork. 3 mammoths made by rubbing away large areas of clay, no pigment added at all, cut out of the wall in its own 2 colors. The wall is not a blank sheet in this cave, and the drawings do not pretend it is. Bulges and folds in the rock are taken up into the animals, so a swell in the limestone becomes a shoulder, and the figure gains a 3rd dimension nobody had to draw. Put the whole chain together, and the most characteristic drawing here runs. Scrape the ground, lay the charcoal, blend it, let it mix with the wall, then engrave the outline to cut the animal free. 5 operations. In order, every time. Some of the animals carry more limbs than an animal has. There is a bison with 8 legs, and a rhinoceros drawn with a stack of horn lines fanning forward from its face. One published reading, argued by the filmmaker and prehistorian Mark Azema, is that this is deliberate, that these artists broke a movement into stages and showed the stages either stacked on one another or set side by side, the same 2 options an animator has. The objection is straightforward. 8 legs can also be 2 bison, drawn over each other by 2 people who never met. Both readings are still standing. The people who did this were anatomically modern humans. Our species, our brain, our hands, no asterisk required. Archaeologists file them under the Aurignaca, a label for a toolkit and a period, not for a lesser grade of person. Outside was Ice Age Europe, open country with cave lions in it, mammoth, woolly rhinoceros, and a cave bear larger than a grizzly that used the same cave they did. Nobody lived in the dark part of this cave, they went in to work. A sealed cave keeps its floor, which is why so much can be said about visits nobody recorded. A rockfall closed the entrance thousands of years ago, and nothing walked in until 1994, so the ground inside is a surface rather than a stratum. On it, hearths where fires were built, spills of charcoal, black smears at head height where a torch was wiped against the rock to knock the ash off. Bare bones lie where the bears died, and one bear skull sits squarely on a fallen block, put there by somebody, not who came then, but where they stopped, and how they lit it. Roughly 8 years old and about 130 centimeters tall, one visitor left a line of bare footprints in the damp clay of a deep passage, wiping a torch on the wall overhead at intervals to keep it burning. Beside the small prints run the tracks of a large canid, and whether that animal was a wolf or an early dog has been argued for 25 years without resolution. Here is the part that gets left out. Charcoal from that torch dates to about 26,000 years ago, thousands of years after the great black drawings were made. The child was a visitor in a gallery that was already unimaginably old. 2 occupations and a gap between them is what the dating program resolved. One span of human activity from about 37,000 to 33,500 years ago, and a second from 31,000 to 28,000. Between the last person of the first group and the first of the second lies more time than separates us from the invention of farming. And the specialists who have spent years reading these walls note something they cannot yet explain. The techniques and the graphic conventions look continuous across the gap. When the first radiocarbon results came back from the black drawings, they landed more than 20,000 years earlier than the accepted sequence allowed. That sequence was built on style. It held that Paleolithic art began simple and schematic, and became accomplished over tens of millennia, and it placed work of Chauvet's quality near the end of that road. So there were 2 ways to read the result. Either the sequence was wrong, or the dates were. The first instinct of much of the discipline was that a drawing this good could not be this old. The answer took 15 years and more than 350 determinations across 4 independent physical methods, of which 259 were radiocarbon and more than 80 had never been published before. All of it went through a single statistical model built on the archaeological evidence. There is also an argument in that cave needing no laboratory at all. Engravings of the later period sit physically on top of the black paintings, which puts the paintings first no matter what any date says. And the descent is real and still in print. Pettit and Barn warn that dating charcoal is not the same as dating the moment somebody drew with it. Underneath the argument about dates sits an assumption that was never really put on trial, that artistic skill accumulates slowly, like sediment. Under it, sophistication becomes a clock. The better the work, the later it must be, and a date that disagrees is a faulty instrument. Notice the shape of that. The style sequence was built by sorting art by how advanced it looked, and was then used to prove that advanced-looking art must be recent. Chauvet does not break a date. It breaks the clock, and everything ever read off it. 2 other parts of the world have since made the point far harder to argue with. On the Indonesian island of Sulawesi, a painted scene of human-like figures with a pig has been dated to at least 51,200 years old, and in January of this year, hand stencils from caves in the island's southeast came in at a minimum of 67,800, the oldest known art on the planet. In Spain, red marks and a hand stencil have been dated beyond 64,800 years, which would make the painters Neanderthals. That last result is genuinely disputed. The first 2 are not. If films about the vanished world are your kind of thing, the Earth before is where they live. Here is the honest limit of all of this. We cannot read the intent. These people left no writing, so there is no recovering what the horse panel was for, who was allowed to see it, or what was said in that chamber while it was made. The usual suggestions, ritual, initiation, a record, something owed to the animals, are guesses shaped like explanations. One negative observation has some force. The animals on these walls are mostly not the animals that were eaten. which makes simple hunting magic an awkward fit. That is the strongest statement available, and it is a weak one. Technique, unlike meaning, can be measured, and measuring it is what 30 years of work in this cave has produced. The list is not in dispute. Tonal shading applied with a fingertip and blended into the rock. Grounds prepared by scraping, to solve a real problem with a real material. Depth built by shrinking a receding form and leaving space around it. Whole figures made subtractively, by removing clay, rather than adding pigment. The shape of the wall taken up into the drawing on purpose. Engraved outlines cutting a blended figure free of its background. Every one of those is a craft decision. The kind made by somebody who has made it before, was shown how by somebody else, and will make it again tomorrow. That is not a flash of genius in the dark, that is a trade. There is a hand on the wall in that cave. Someone put a palm flat against the rock, blew red pigment around it, and lifted it away, leaving the shape of the gap where they had been. The same gesture, made the same way, is on a wall in Sulawesi more than 30,000 years earlier. It survives in both places for the same dull reason: limestone keeps a mark, and wood and hide and skin and body paint do not. So what changed across those tens of thousands of years is not the capability, it is the accident of what the ground happened to keep. These people were not on their way to becoming us, they were already us, doing what we do, with the materials they had, in the dark, by firelight. We are not looking at the beginning of art, we are looking at the oldest part of it that stone would hold.